This is a fun follow-up to our previous video about how Donald Trump's vicious threats against a critical Republican senator backfired spectacularly, and we have breaking news indicating that Trump and MAGA are about to take a bad situation and make it considerably worse, as otherwise non-MAGA Republicans are panicking about the current situation. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. All right, friends, breaking news and a fun follow-up all at once. Let's get to the fun stuff, okay? Now, this is in the context of Tom Tillis, the Republican incumbent senator from North Carolina, announcing that he won't seek re-election next year, leaving it very, very possible, if not likely, and I would say likely at this point, that Democrats flip that seat in the midterms. Not set in stone, but looking increasingly likely. Well, I said that Trump and the Trump family seem to be taking this bad situation that they created and looking to make it so much worse, because the breaking news is this, courtesy of a leak from someone close to the Trump family. Von Hilliard from NBC says a source close to the Trump family says Lara Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, is, quote, strongly considering jumping in the race. Asked about the odds that she runs for the North Carolina Senate to replace, or rather the Senate seat for North Carolina, to replace Tillis, the source says, quote, I'd put it as high as one could be considering it. The race would be over before it began. And that's true. If Lara Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, the amateur singer, the person who was appointed co-chair of the Republican National Convention, the RNC, last year, nepotism in its highest form, a woman who, by virtue of her closeness to Trump, landed a cushy Fox News hosting gig, if she wants that seat, it's hers. She's got it. There's no way that the Republicans in North Carolina would defy Donald Trump. And if that happens, if Lara Trump becomes the Republican nominee, as election experts are noting, that will make it very, very probable that she loses in a general election. As Alakshya Jain, who is an electoral analyst, points out, holds for the general election, too. Lara Trump versus Roy Cooper, the former Democratic governor until last year of North Carolina, would be over before it begins. That might be one of the worst imaginable candidates other than Mini Soldier. And that's a reference to Mark Robinson, the disgraced former Republican North Carolina lieutenant governor. He was Trump's nominee for governor last year, his preferred candidate. And it turns out that he was a frequent poster on some pretty spicy porn sites. He referred to himself as a black Nazi. He's defended the institution of slavery. Well, Mini Soldier was the username he used. And so on that score, I should also note that the former lieutenant governor, Mark Robinson himself, seemed to publicly indicate that he'd love to take a shot at replacing Tillis. The thing is, if these two, Lara Trump especially, but even Robinson, run, and especially if Robinson has Trump's backing, he'll win the primary. Robinson won the primary, and Republicans stood behind him, even as scandal after scandal after scandal emerged. These two will win. Either one of them would win the Republican primary, and it would almost certainly doom them in the ensuing election, particularly if Roy Cooper ran as the Democratic nominee. I also noted that non-MAGA Republicans are panicking about the situation. Here is very popular Republican conservative podcaster and radio host Eric Erickson saying, cheering on the departure of a senator who is now freed from the partisan constraints of re-election and who will stay in the Senate until December 31st, 2026, is not wise. Be glad, but also understand he's now free up to care, to not care, what you think at all, which is true. And as I mentioned in Tom Tillis's, announcement, he indicated with his final few words that he's going to serve out the remainder of his 18 months in Congress, and he's free to follow his conscience and his moral compass as best he sees fit, which means he is more emboldened and empowered to vote against Trump and vote with Democrats. He may or may not do that, but he's in a position to now. So, again, to recap, you've got Lara Trump, Donald Trump's MAGA daughter-in-law, Nepo baby galore, amateur singer, RNC co-chair, Fox News host, indicating that she wants to jump in the race, which is consistent with reporting we've heard about her in the past. Because when Marco Rubio, former Republican senator for Florida, left the Senate to become Trump's Secretary of State, there was heavy reporting that she was going to try to jump in that particular race as well, but she ran into the roadblock that is Ron DeSantis, who will occasionally defy Donald Trump, right? So she has senatorial and political ambitions. There's no reason to believe that what stopped her in Florida would stop her in North Carolina. It's hard to believe that Trump would oppose her. So there's that. There's Mark Robinson throwing his hat in the ring. But again, now you have Eric Erickson and others like him freaking out. And by the way, so are other Republican senators. They're concerned about this as well and what this portends, not just in North Carolina, but in their own races as well.
I just talked to Kirsten Gillibrand. Yeah. She thinks Texas is in play because of the primary. Do you think that the primary puts Texas in play?
Well, there's no doubt, but that if the Attorney General is the Republican nominee, there will be hundreds of millions of dollars spent in a futile effort to try to keep that seat in Republican hands. So I think to that extent, I would agree with her sentiment. The risk of the wrong person winning the primary would be catastrophic.
So that's John Cornyn, who is also a Republican incumbent seeking re-election next year, and someone who has also occasionally pissed off Donald Trump and pissed off MAGA. And we hear an increasing number of threats about this as well from MAGA that, will just primary John Cornyn, just like Tom Tillis was the target of threats to have him primaried by a MAGA loyalist. And what John Cornyn is saying is if the corrupt Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who was nearly impeached, I think he was impeached and nearly convicted by a Republican-led legislature, and I want you to think about that, how corrupt a Republican politician has to be for his fellow Republicans to get this close to kicking his ass out of office, especially a MAGA Republican loyalist like Ken Paxton. If he runs in the primary, he's going to beat Cornyn. And Cornyn seems to recognize it. And Cornyn's like, hey, listen, it's rock, paper, scissors, baby. Yeah, you might beat me, but you will make Texas vulnerable to a Democratic challenger. And so what I mentioned in the previous video, right now, with Tillis announcing he's out just by default, this race is leaning Democrat. If Roy Cooper, the popular ex-Democratic governor, steps into the race, it will sit squarely in favor of Democrats. Again, not to say it's guaranteed, but that's a pickup for Democrats. Texas could be in play as well if this same sort of process goes along, in which MAGA devours its own, in which Republicans devour their own. That's why there's panic. You see on Cornyn's face, he is panicked. He's terrified. As people are noting, great weekend for Democratic campaign committees in the House and the Senate. 2 retirements and 2 top pickup opportunities. Tom Tillis, whom we've been discussing, and Don Bacon, the so-called Main Street, moderate Republican in a district in Nebraska, which was won, that particular district, by both President Biden and Vice President Harris, which means that will flip almost certainly for a Democrat after Bacon retires. He's not seeking re-election in 2026. So we're almost certainly going to pick that seat up. And it's a close margin in the House already. Anderson Clayton, the aforementioned, I mentioned in a previous video, the chair of the Democratic Party in North Carolina, they finally issued a statement. She says, Tom Tillis spent years putting D.C. Republicans and corporate donors ahead of the people of North Carolina, and voters noticed. Today, Tom Tillis finally faced reality. This made him wildly unpopular. No matter who the next NCGOP chooses as a rubber stamp to greenlight their extreme cuts to funding for public schools, slashes to Social Security and Medicare, and attacks against reproductive freedom, we'll be ready to fight back. Let's be clear. Today's decision shows just how much influence the most fringe right-wing voices have in their primary. Our state is not a pawn in Donald Trump's political games. We deserve leaders who will fight for affordable health care, strong public schools, and an economy that works for everyone. Over the next 18 months, we're excited to lay out the choices voters have in this election and ensure North Carolinians see the Republican nominee for the far-right crony they will be. We look forward to next November when North Carolinians will finally elect a senator that will actually fight for North Carolina. So this is awesome. This is awesome. Again, the opportunities here. That was the NC Dems statement. You know what was Pretty shocking, though, the statement from the National Republican Party about this. NRSC Chairman Tim Scott Senate statement on the North Carolina Senate race. This is stunning, folks. Okay, this is the National Republican Senatorial Committee Chairman, okay, issuing an official statement. Quote, Donald Trump has won North Carolina 3 times, and the state's been represented by 2 Republican senators for over a decade. That streak will continue in 2026 when North Carolinians elect a conservative leader committed to advancing an agenda of opportunity, prosperity, and security. No reference to Tom Tillis about how he's been a loyal public servant, nothing, just ice cold, and is subtly implying, I would argue, that North Carolinian, that Tom Tillis is not the sort of Republican that North Carolinians should have elected in the first place. North Carolinians will elect a conservative leader committed to advancing an agenda of opportunity, prosperity, and security, implying a contrast with Tom Tillis. So I put this out on Twitter. I'm like, damn, Tom Tillis, are you going to let them talk to you that way after they need you for another 18 months? You're going to let them treat you this way? I'm sure Tillis won't fall for that, but that'd be funny if he did. Senate Democrats responded with this. They said Tom Tillis' decision not to run for re-election is another blow to Republicans' chances as they face a midterm backlash that puts their majority at risk. Even Tillis admits the GOP plan to slash Medicaid and spike costs for families is toxic. And in 2026, Democrats will flip North Carolina's Senate seat. And I hope that they are correct. I will also note that both the conservative New York Post and the conservative Wall Street Journal are also getting a bit nervous. They're noting that this announcement makes the Republican majority very vulnerable. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's possible. It is possible if the stars align, if Democrats defend all of their seats. So, for example, Georgia, which is represented by incumbent Democrat John Ossoff, we need to keep him in Congress. There's a good chance that he will lose re-election. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible. So we have to defend him. We have to defend Michigan, because I think Gary Peters is retiring, if I'm not mistaken. So that seat will be open. Michigan's a blue, very purple state. We have to defend those seats. But if we flip North Carolina, if we flip Maine, which is represented by the wildly unpopular so-called moderate Republican Susan Collins, who's always concerned about Donald Trump, but always bends the knee, and she represents a blue state. So if we flip North Carolina, if we flip Maine, if Texas primaries John Cornyn and puts Ken Paxton as the Republican nominee, that means a competent, popular Democrat could flip Texas. So if we flip Texas, if we flip these seats and defend all of ours, it becomes a 50-50 split. Lisa Murkowski, the Republican incumbent from Alaska, she's been going on a book tour talking about how awful Donald Trump is, how authoritarian, how he's threatening everybody left, right, and center, publicly indicating that she might caucus with the Democrats as well. She left that open. So I'm not saying it's likely that we flip the Senate, but it is very likely. It's very possible that we could shrink their margins, and it is possible that we flip control of the Senate if we play our cards right and the stars align. This is not good news for the Republicans at all, and I think that's why you're seeing this split. Non-MAGA Republicans in and out of Congress are publicly panicking about this, and the Trump family seem to be eager to make this situation so much worse by nominating divisive figures like Lara Trump or Mark Robinson to take Tillis' spot. There you have it, folks. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.